Your Airbnb could be operating illegally and you don't even know it.
Hosting laws vary by state, city, neighborhood, even building, and they are changing fast.
Today, we're breaking down the best and worst states for Airbnb hosting and what makes some markets riskier than others and how to protect your business.
And don't miss the end because we're sharing when regulations really benefit professional hosts.
Hi, I'm Sarah Karakayan.
And I'm Annette Grant. And together we are
Thanks for visiting.
We've been hosting for well over a decade, welcomed tens of thousands of guests, and earned thousands of 5-star reviews.
Our portfolio continues to bring in over $1.5 million year over year, and supported not only by the industry's leading brands, but also some of the biggest media outlets.
And we're here to help you with your furnished rental.
What makes a state host friendly or host risky? Well, there's no official best state list, but there are clear patterns that make hosting easier or harder.
And states tend to fall on a spectrum based on some factors. So let's think about state level versus city level. For example, New York. You would think New York City would be the most amazing place to have a short-term rental because of all the tourism there. Well, they banned it. So it's not going to work there. However, the rest of New York State, you should be good to go. Also, there are registration and tax structures that can be different within your state. The other thing that could be state level versus city level is enforcement styles. Sometimes they're very reactive, other times they are aggressive. So you want to know what you're dealing with there. And then just political posturing overall with tourism and housing. That can be completely different on a state level. And then as you zoom in city by city, there can be way different posturing there.
Yeah, for an example, in Columbus, Ohio, our city council are made up of a representative for this exact topic of short-term rentals. He has real estate. He has short-term rentals. So while it's not a guarantee, it is likely that even though we have regulations here, which is actually great for us, and we'll go over that in the video later on and why that's actually good for us, as long as he's on city council and he represents these discussions, I don't see a place where it's going to be completely outlawed anytime soon. Or in the city of Columbus, Columbus is a city, but then within Columbus, we have cities like the city of Upper Arlington, the city of Grandview, and they have their own regulations and or bans around short-term rentals. And you've really got to understand this. We've talked to hosts before who buy property and their realtor doesn't really know. They think it's like, oh, the city of Columbus is fine, but really they're buying property in this city within a city and they're kind of screwed. So understanding exactly where your property is and who is leading the political conversation there. What is a tax structure like? Is it clear? Is it vague? What is the state level regulations and considerations versus where it exactly is located? You have to take all of this into account when looking at the property from a bird's eye view.
Now that we've done some education and disclaimers on how a state versus city can be very different, we do want to zoom out and go over the states that are generally more host friendly. They tend to have clearer rules, statewide frameworks, and tourism board policies throughout the state. So here are those that we want to share with you: Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and Arizona.
What they usually have in common, like Annette said, is that state-level guidance that limits city overreach, registration instead of bans. Short-term rentals are treated as businesses, not loopholes, and investment affordability, right? They make their investments attractive for people. So host-friendly does not mean unregulated. We're not saying it's the wild, wild west anymore in these states. It just means that it's more predictable. So the key takeaway is predictability equals lower stress and better long-term planning for your short-term rental business.
And this is not to say we have not had contact with hosts in Florida, Texas, Tennessee, and Arizona very recently that are all going through their own regulation issues. And we want to just make sure you're keeping on top of it.
Well, and just to pivot on that or to extend that, because these states, Florida, Texas, Tennessee, Arizona, Annette, I'm thinking these are highly competitive states because it is more host friendly. So these hosts have their own challenges to overcome. Maybe the state isn't their problem or the municipalities aren't their problem, but
Extreme competition.
standing out could be their own challenge, right? And doesn't mean don't do it. It just means recognizing where you're sitting and what is actually worth your time to dig into.
And let's say, for instance, Florida, there isn't income tax, but there's the tourism tax, but you might not even live in Florida to be able to take advantage of those income tax advantages. And also, one thing that you have to keep in mind here overall is property taxes throughout. We know that they can vary wildly within all of these states. When you do purchase your first short-term rental business and you need any clarity on decision making with your pricing, your operations, if you want to learn how to work with us one-on-one, go to thanksforvisiting.com/waitlist. Let's review where states where the hosts need to be more careful. It's not that these states are bad, but they absolutely do require more vigilance. Those states would be California, New York, Hawaii, and Colorado. Here are those common challenges in these said states. Again, city bans and or caps. A lot of these states with it, and then also in the city, they do have limits on how many short-term rental permits that they give out. There is rapid rule changes. This is an industry. It's one of the blessings and the curse. It's growing rapidly. Therefore, changes within enforcement, within regulations is happening rapidly. And with higher volume, there can be a higher volume of complaints triggering to the city than to the state. So we just want to be careful with enforcement. And then also, these states, California, New York, Hawaii, and Colorado, historically have a higher barrier to entry with the investment that you need to make to purchase real estate here.
Yes, many hosts here operate legally, but only because they stay informed. For example, we learned this. We interviewed a couple in New York City, and we learned that if the property itself is zoned a specific way, they can short-term rent that property, but those properties are limited. They're, of course, expensive. So you might go to New York City and find places to stay, like short-term rentals to stay on apps like Airbnb, et cetera. But that's because either they're operating illegally or their building, their property is zoned as such. So again, it can get so nuanced. The whole underlying message here is to make sure you trust your information resource when you're purchasing a property, or maybe you've had the property for a year now and you're actually not sure. Now's the time to find out, because ignorance, not knowing, is not an excuse, and it's not going to hold up in the state, in the court of law, if you will. So knowing is better than not knowing.
This is why most new hosts get this wrong. We assume when we go in to Airbnb, they are going to tell us, warn us, you're not allowed to short-term rent here. We actually did this experiment ourselves, going in as a new host, because I do this often, if like looking at new properties, you just kind of put it into Airbnb, you put the city, put the state, and it'll pump out, if you put the bedroom count, what your potential estimated earnings would be. And they even show you potential competition in your area. Well, Sarah and I did an experiment. We went in and put in the city that we know that is absolutely not allowed in. And we could still get that estimate. And not only would we get the enticing estimate, we would get our competition. But when we saw where the competition was, it was a halo right around the actual city where you were going to rent. So it's one of those things that I think and even guests, I think guests think that Airbnb is going to warn them if the home is legally operating, or Airbnb is going to let you know ahead of time. That's not how it works. Or they think someone within the city or the neighborhood will alert them. This is not a figure it out later thing. You need to know ahead of time. All right. And people think that they'll just try it, test it, and see that someone will alert them. But this is not the case.
And I'll tell you, depending on the different cities, obviously this is all subject to whatever city you're in. If you think that you're going to fly under the radar, this is no longer 2018, 2019. There are there's AI, these cities are becoming hip to how much money they can make by charging you an excise tax or hospitality tax or something of that nature. They're not going to allow you to operate. They will shut you down. They work very closely with Airbnb, with Vrbo, and they will not allow your listing to exist on these channels that make it very easy for us to rent out our places online. So all I'm saying to you is, what's the worst that can happen? Well, you invest in this, not cheap property. Maybe you furnish it and you do all the things. You operate for a short amount of time. You get caught, whether you know or you don't know that what you're doing is legal or not legal, and they make it impossible for you to operate. What now? Like, that's a big mistake to make. And we see most of the hosts that we see don't even realize it, or they were given poor information. They trusted a person, mostly a realtor.
But always trust but verify, even your
Yes.
realtor. We see this so often when we are trolling Zillow, and they will give they'll not estimated actual earnings from a short-term rental previous, but that is pre the regulations changing. And now maybe it's 30 days plus, or it's not allowed at all, but they're enticing people to buy with those short-term rental records.
So get more than one piece of advice about where you're purchasing or where you've already purchased and where you're operating, and just make sure.
Yeah, double check even your realtor's work.
Yeah, you're good to go.
Here's how to responsibly host regardless of where you buy your property and where you're hosting. So you need to be able to answer at all times, is registration required? And if it is required, when is the expiration date on your registration? For instance, we have to have our registration, it's framed, it's public, it's in every single one of our properties. We have it logged on when those expire, when they need to renew. Also, do you know all of your city's current STR rules? Just because you went through them when you purchased doesn't mean you need to stay up to date with them. You need to know exactly what office and who enforces that. You better believe we know the first names of a lot of people inside our offices. Also, how often they are changing, can you track those changes? And you want to get alerts, even if it's city council, be on the newsletter. If it's just Google alerts, we love to have Google alerts in our town, anything short-term related. That way you are always in the loop on what's going on.
So this is not set it and forget it, as with everything in short-term rentals. And despite what some of the gurus or influencers say about it, this is part of running a professional hosting business, okay? So the simple habit of quarterly regulation check-in, right? Just make a little appointment for yourself for us, we know it's the licensing section of Columbus, Ohio, and I can, like Annette said, I know I have the email address, and I could simply write in and ask the question, hey, I've Googled this, I can't find any changes, is everything still the same? Subscribe to city or county updates, and just know where to look before there's a problem. Before we hit record on this video, Annette and I were just going back in time of these hosts who were charged with some serious penalties. I'm talking 6-figure penalties for operating illegally, for operating outside of a permit, for operating a secondary home instead of a primary. I mean, it can get nuanced, so you need to know.
And the last thing that we want to say about what hosts need to do, regardless of where you host, we are all in this together. Sarah and I met at a city council meeting because they were proposing really strict enforcements. Showing up matters. And showing up matters in your city. It matters in your state. It matters wherever you are in the world, because the short-term rental business, we have to keep the integrity. And showing up, if something's going to change, you can't just throw up your hands and say it doesn't matter, because we have met, obviously Sarah and I met there. That made a difference with every host showing up. We hear story after story of hosts showing up at the meetings, sending in the email, writing the representatives. They need to hear our voices alongside the complaint voices, because I believe this firmly. We are the business owners. We have that weight as real estate owners, as business owners, and we're pouring into the local economies. They need to hear our voice alongside those that might not want us there. And it matters across the board, no matter where you are. And at that city council meeting, believe it or not, we were for the regulations. So regulations can actually be a good thing. Why? Because it's going to reduce that illegal competition. Get out of here. If you don't want to do things on the up and up, bye quickly. It can improve guest quality, and it can also just really heavily protect professional hosts. And then larger than that, protecting the communities that we live in.
Right. When barriers to entry exist, serious hosts often win. Regulation can separate hobby hosting from the real businesses.
And we want to let you know if there's anything you want to know about renting responsibly, we are lucky because there is an organization called rentresponsibly.org, and you can go there for so many resources in all of the states in the US, and you can find out other hosts in those states and cities where they are renting responsibly. You can get involved there. So again, go to rentresponsibly.org.
Where you host, it does matter, but how you operate matters even more.
Yeah, and the goal here, this isn't fear. It's just staying informed and adaptable, being able to pivot. But more importantly, remember, best state, worst state, you have to understand that some things do not fit on a best and worst list. They don't even fit into a spreadsheet. Tennessee may be a great place to host on a spreadsheet, but if you have no interest in the state or you're too far from there, again, no family, no friends, and you're just doing it for passive income, it may not be relevant to your long-term goals. So, Sarah was in New York City when she started her journey. Purchasing there made the most sense for her. It was a very successful decision, but you heard us say for the investment, it was a huge investment. She already knew the rules and regulations there. She literally, it was in her own home for her to get started. So that was such a great decision for her. But again, this is where you know you best. You know your long-term goals best, because short-term success would be really hard to find in short-term rentals because you've got to really dig in.
And if we want to know, if you've been a part of any sort of regulation conversation, if you've been slapped with a penalty,
let us know. Share below. Let us know where it happened, when it happened, how you resolved it. More importantly, if you've seen success in your city with showing up, let us know below.
Maybe you're in a state, you're one of the worst states that we listed here. I mean, you want to come and defend it. Let us know what it's actually like to host in those states. With that, I am Sarah Caracan.
I'm Annette Grant, and together we are
Thanks for visiting.